the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is a very special episode, and I'm just going to kick it right over to you, Lindsay, because I feel like if anybody, you should tell us what's going on here.
I mean, we're both pretty big fans of Bill Murray, you know. So if you've been listening, you know that we do appreciate Mr. Murray, and we do end every podcast with a Murray moment, but extra special edition this week. We're just a few days shy of his 68th birthday. Is that right?
68.
That man. So we figured, why not do an entire podcast dedicated to him, focus on a movie that is maybe one that you haven't heard of, one that kind of slipped by, you know, the radar, but is one of our favorites, and that is 1990's Quick Change. And I think it's really funny, too, that Justin, both you and I, this is one of our favorite Bill Murray movies.
Yeah, you actually showed this at one of your screenings that I went to, and I was like, oh, yeah, Quick Change.
And it's not one that generally people, pigeonhole as like, oh, yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this movie so much.
So we're going to be talking about Quick Change, our main movie, and then go into our picks of the week that have something to do with Bill Murray. And Justin, what's your pick?
My pick, Murray-related pick, was Kingpin, which is a movie I'll go on to talk about later, but it's one of those movies that just could use a whole lot more Murray in it.
I mean, what couldn't?
Yeah.
You know? I would say the same thing for mine. Mine was Tootsie from the early 80s, from 82, where he was very much a supporting role. And I think everything could always benefit from more Bill Murray. But
this is a full-on Murray episode.
Yeah, it should be pretty fun. As far as Quick Change goes, we'll be talking about how, this was the first and only directing credit for Bill Murray, or co-directing credit. He also helped write and produce this. And how it was critically received. The cast is kind of impressive too, why we love this movie, and just some other kind of reasons why we think you should investigate this one if you haven't seen it, and if you have, it's time to revisit it. It's probably been a while. Yeah,
of all the movies we've done, this to me is like, I know that a lot of movies we do, I know we kind of mention like, oh, maybe this is something you haven't seen, which it then ends up being a movie that like a lot of people are like, I've seen Predator, I've seen Lost Boys, or whatever. But Quick Change is one of those movies that it's one that I've asked people, like, because when we go to do these, friends and stuff like, oh, do you know this movie? Do you know that movie? And Quick Change was one that,
you're like, what?
Along
what
with Ed Wood, like most people had not seen. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy that we're getting in, highlighting a movie that isn't as recognizable as far as like a Bill Murray movie goes.
And it wasn't, panned either by critics. If anything, it was very, it was received very well, which is even more interesting that it didn't do better when it was released. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're one of those people that lives and dies by the Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb ratings, this is a highly rated film, so if that's your gauge, then you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
So before we get into, we'll do a little clip of the movie, but especially since this is one that maybe a lot of people haven't seen, could you tell us what this movie is about? It is based on the book, am I correct?
Yes, it is. It's based off the J. Connolly novel, also called Quick Change, and there was a movie in 1985 called Hold Up, which was kind of the first incarnation of the novel, and Quick Changes is the second. So yeah, that's kind of a little mini history where the story comes from. Now the story itself follows three bank robbers who successfully rob a New York City bank, but find that the most difficult part of the whole ordeal is actually getting out of New York. Bill Murray, his girlfriend Geena Davis, and their friend Randy Quaid just keep running into a series of roadblocks. And it's not a movie, I don't think, that's based off like that type of anxiety humor where there's a roadblock here and a roadblock there. It seems like it's more about the love-hate relationship that one can have with New York.
Yeah, I feel like there is this sort of like we'll talk about it, this
we'll get further into it.
A hatred for, or this like hatred for the city, or like you're sick of the city.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go into a clip here, and then we'll start getting into Quick Change with Bill Murray.
Sounds good.
One of our faves.
Happy birthday, Bill.
Hugh, let's not mess with me today, okay? I'm robbing the bank.
What the hell kind of clown are you?
The crying on the inside kind, I guess.
Look, I'm just an old man.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's go. This is a robbery. You believe this? This is a robbery.
It is.
Thank you. All right, quiet. Put your hands on top of your head. Stand up.
We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die.
So right away, Bill Murray in this movie, like you said before, his first and only directorial effort. Out of all the movies Bill Murray's done, even though he goofs in this movie, and there is a lot of that same sarcasm that he's known for, I almost want to say this is like one of his most mature roles, at least up until this point, you know, because Randy Quaid is essentially playing, I think, like the character that would have normally been portrayed by Bill Murray. And in this one, he's like the leader of the pack.
Yeah.
I mean, he's always been sort of a confident character in other films like Ghostbusters and stuff, but
very much the
I feel
leader,
like this one, he's like, they've given him like he's done like a straight laced job and like has been pushed to the edge, and is like the leader of the pack. And I kind of like that. I like that he's playing more of the straight man in this, but it's still his comedy rings through.
I love seeing him play a part like this because it reminds you that Bill Murray's totally funny and has a great sarcastic sense of humor, but he's actually a really good actor. And I mean, of course, like we see kind of like the serious and like sarcastic nature of the range of his acting later in his career. We see a lot more of it. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. And then, and I'm sort of, referencing like Wes Anderson days.
It's just like this was, we had The Razor's Edge many years before, which was not funny, but really showcased his dramatic side. But then we have this that is a comedy, but it is, a very like straightforward, like complicated character that's not just like one dimensional or a Caddyshack Carl Spackler type guy.
Yeah.
Know?
And this, he shared directing credits with Howard Franklin. So, which I think, for a lot of actors, they will try to direct a movie like their directorial debut and then also star in it usually so they can get backing or funding or whatever is generally the case. And Bill Murray chose to get a co-director, which I'm assuming was a good relationship because Howard Franklin went on to direct two more movies starring Bill Murray.
Do you know the story of why it ended up like that? Why it ended up with them directing?
I do not. What?
Well, they had the only two people that I've heard that they approached were Jonathan Demme.
Really?
Yeah, I know. They approached Jonathan Demme, and he turned it down to do Silence of the Lambs, and which was also 1991 release. Memory serves.
Respect.
And this could definitely be a Murray moment, but it fits in here. Bill Murray approached Ron Howard to do it, and there's a little bit of salty history here because Ron Howard read it and he declined to do it because he felt like there was no one to root for. He said he didn't feel like it was very funny, and he felt like why do I care, because I don't care about any of these, like, the main characters.
Yeah, too dark for Ron Howard.
Way too dark for Ron Howard. But Bill Murray took this to heart because this was his baby,
Yeah.
And yes, he hadn't signed on to direct it or co-direct it at that point, but he had put a lot of heart into this, and for someone to tell you that this movie isn't funny, he was just like, well, all right, see you later, dude. Like, he's had kind of a I think he's mature. He's turning 68. He's a very mature fellow at this point. But there's still a little bit of saltiness. He's talked about it in a couple interviews.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be tough if you really sought after a director that you thought could. And Ron Howard is a strong director. I think he's a solid Hollywood director.
It just wasn't his cup of tea.
But this movie is definitely I think this movie is handled in a way, because this is it's not a strange film, but it definitely it's like it's peculiar in a way. Yes. It's not necessarily, even though there are obstacles and things happen, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a situational comedy.
No.
Because there is this sort of underlying theme, and there is a strong I think both Bill Murray and Geena Davis and Jason Robards, for that matter, have like really strong characters that build throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. It's not just based on like these setups for Bill Murray to kind of goof on. Yeah, which is what I really love about it the most. Is it really moves.
Yeah, it's not slapsticky. You don't feel like, oh, here I'm being set up for the next joke. It's not a jokey type of movie at all. It's very much like these characters, you really start to feel for them because of what they're going through, just trying to get out of the city, that frustration that you feel whenever you're just held back from something and you were almost home free, but it's just like it is running uphill.
Yeah, and there's a few scenes in this that I wonder if it's more of like Bill Murray's influence, because there are a few things in this movie, and for example, the jousting scene, which when you're watching the movie, it kind of comes out of left field.
It does.
And there's several moments, especially with the woman with the flowers.
For anyone though that doesn't know, like they're lost. Bill Murray, Randy Quaid, and Geena Davis are lost, and they just like come upon this guy that's like on a bike with his pole, and they're like, excuse me, can you just give us directions? And then all of a sudden this guy and another guy start riding their bikes at full speed, like in a jousting match.
In a very like melodramatic.
Yeah, it's not funny.
It kind of goes into its own universe. Like it goes into this like outer universe and then comes back in. And it does that a couple times in the movie where I feel like it's not afraid to break from the norm. And I do wonder if that's something that like maybe turned off like Ron Howard, whereas like Bill Murray's, he's certainly not afraid to break from the norm in movies. I was watching Where the Buffalo Roam not too long ago, and just the first like 25 minutes of that movie, I think I wonder if like
there's so much
a
to
run
talk
of the
about
mill
with that movie.
I know, but like if like a run of the mill director just sort of read that and was just like, yeah, what can I do?
Where do I even start?
Bill Murray's just like, don't worry about it.
I think that's one of the greatest things about him is that, I mean, you can pretty much give him anything, and he's going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's almost like one of those things. It's like a given. Like I always read, like if you're reading about a movie that Bill Murray was in, especially if he wasn't a main character, it's like Bill Murray improvised his lines for this movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, what movie has he not improvised
what a big
most
surprise.
of his lines? So, and I think this is a movie too where he does have a lot of. He kind of goes off on tangents that I think are hilarious. I don't know if that's. If that was all scripted or what, but there's many moments where he really goes not over the top, but
if anything, understated in some instances.
And especially when he's like explaining things to somebody, specifically. And if I can find the clip of it, I'll use the clip of him and Phil Hartman, which is one of my favorite scenes of the movie of him like. Talking.
Oh, and Phil Hartman is in this for a second. That's a
anytime Phil Hartman's in something, it's like I get sentimental, and then there's like a little bit of heartbreak.
Yeah.
So going back to like talking about this being a movie, sort of an underseen film. So we were talking about this the last few days, and prepping for this, where. We kind of looked it up because this was released in July of 1990. Mm-hmm. The
height of summer.
And even back in the 90s, I mean, even dating back to like 80s, summer was already considered like that's when you put out your big blockbuster, your tentpole type movies. And this was you got to remember this is a time when, I mean, now there's like 5 movies will be released in a weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 1990, usually one movie came out in the weekend. They didn't put anything up against it. But this film was released against Ghost, which became like this runaway hit of 1990, like the highest grossing film in 1990.
I can't even remember how much money like it has made.
It was something like,
it's
for the 90s, like
insane.
$400 million or something insane, which
insane.
It doesn't seem like much now, but for the 90s or early 1990. Yeah. So this movie kind of got buried, it was kind of released and I can see how watching this movie, you'd think it was like, it is very funny. It is smart. So it makes sense, but this was one of those, and I think this is like the perfect example of a movie it just got buried by another film that was released that was just sort of a gargantuan hit. And then no one, by the time this movie, had a chance, it was already, there was another movie, huge movie coming out. And
Wasn't
so I think
Arachnophobia or something.
Yeah,
a week
something
or two after it.
Yeah, something really big. And I think that this was one that really didn't, because this was one I didn't see. Granted, I was a kid, but I saw this on video cassette and
so did I.
On television multiple times, and this where I think a lot of people, where I think it kind of gained its cult following. Again, I think this is, I would consider this a cult film by the definition of it not being a really well-known film, but there being like a very, people who do know of it, like really, really love it a lot.
Yeah. It's not one of those that someone says, oh yeah, it deserves to be forgotten. I don't think that any review that I've read or seen or anything, anyone that's seen it, no one's ever said that. If anything, the people that have seen it kind of share our sentiment that it's an underrated classic.
Well, again, I can't say this enough. We're going to talk more about Quick Change, but if this is one that you're unfamiliar with, this really is, I adore this movie so much. And this is another movie that I consider like sort of our, along with Monster Squad, like the genesis of this, us doing this podcast is like this love for these few movies, Quick Change.
These like underrated movies that maybe you saw, maybe you didn't, but that really deserve their time.
Yeah, and I throw underrated around a ton, but this is like,
this one fits the bill for sure.
If I had to like be pressed, like if someone was like really drilling me, like, no, what do you really think is underrated? I'd feel like confidently say Quick Change.
Yes.
So let's go to another clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this, and then we'll get into our Murray centric pick of the weeks.
Sounds good.
that our plane?
No, no. If it were our plane, it'd be crashing.
Where's the airport? How far?
Flores, flores para los muertos, los muertos, los muertos.
There must be a lot of competition for that corner.
Man, thank God she's not too symbolic or anything.
What does it mean anyway, Grim? Flores por los muertos.
I sure couldn't tell you.
You know, Grim, it means flowers for the dead.
Oh, God. We're all gonna die. Oh, we're all gonna die.
Give him a moment. He's getting his second wind.
So coming back to the themes of the film, I know we've talked about this a little bit in the beginning, a little bit about like the sort of like hatred for the city. Because you mentioned this movie is very New York centric, and I'm not from New York. I've only been in New York once in my life, so I'm pulling my experience information from hearsay.
Sure.
But from my understanding, New York was this sort of great place to be in the 70s, though it was dangerous. It was, you always hear about like Paris in the 30s, New York in the 70s. And then the 80s were like a time where they were like, quote unquote, cleaning up New York. And it became more of a, and it was like the 80s excess of like Wall Street and being more, I guess like tourist friendly or whatever. And I feel like a decade of that spiked rent kind of changed the representation of like what New York was like like any good thing, like some restaurant is like great and then it becomes everybody's favorite restaurant.
It lost its like realness, its grittiness.
And I feel like this movie has a little bit of that backlash of coming off of the 80s of New York and just being like sort of sick of what it's become. And I feel like that's a running theme through the movie. It's subtle and at times there's one moment where Bill Murray's character looks up at it's like a condominium being built and she's like, well, you don't do that anymore. And so there's a suggestion that his job was being part of the sort of like changing of New York, making it more
like a redevelopment.
Like a more like processed. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like I'll use like the way Falling Down had that sort of like breaking point. Though Falling Down, I think, had a little more darker themes happening, more individual.
You think?
Individual themes. But this one, I feel like it does have this sort of like, I'm done with New York. I'm done with what it's become. And I think that you could put that same set of like aesthetics or like idealisms on other cities that have, you see a change, or like a neighborhood that you see gentrification is like a huge
completely
thing that is, everybody talks about now, like with, cities that are up and coming or neighborhoods that change. And this to me, like, I think is a running theme of someone who's just like sick of it. And I think that there's several scenes in here, like the guy, when he's talking to like the Wall Street guy with the watch, this is a guy who he knows exactly who this guy is. Like Bill Murray kind of like puts him in his place, and he's like,
this guy offers him a watch, right? He's just like giving him this watch to like let him out first, to be one of the first hostages, and he's like, it's worth $1,000.
Yeah, this is a gift to you.
Yeah.
And Bill Murray puts him in his place.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that there's like, these little indicators. And then the scene, like I said, with Phil Hartman, where he, Phil Hartman's like, I got to have a gun now. Like, we've been robbed 3 times. Like, this is where it's become. And they mention like the rent difference, like what he used to pay. And Bill Murray's line of like, really? Woodstock to Charles Bronson in 20 years, like what happened? In this sort of like compartmentalizing people and how they, they want to live in the city, but they want all the niceties and comforts of like the suburbs. And I don't know if that was like a driving point in the film, but I do feel like it's peppered throughout. and also like just the idea of like not being able to get out of the city and the gridlock and the grind, and how that is something that it's a fight to live in a city and to live in a city that's really expensive, and like San Francisco, New York, Chicago, to be where everything's happening. It is a fight to be able to like struggle and survive and afford to live there and get through your day.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I think a lot of, and what you're saying about this, I think that is completely true about this movie. I think that it's this weird, like, kind of love letter to New York. Like there is this love for New York that's in there, but there's this also like, you understand that this city sucks, you know, in certain ways, or it's started to just not be like what it once was for whatever reason, or even something like, you know, there's a scene where they ask for directions from some construction workers, and the guys are just like, I don't know. We're just putting up this sign, or we're just taking down the sign. Somebody else is coming up here to put up another sign. Just like completely not helpful. And you come to depend on people like not being helpful, not knowing where they are, or New York in a way has made them completely cynical, but they have come to expect that, really. But it's just Bill Murray his character has reached kind of a breaking point. And it's not necessarily, I don't think that this movie in any way is like a middle finger to New York at all. I think that it's very much like appreciating what it is or what it once was, but also being like, man.
But I do think think that there's like I do think that there's like an underline of like a satirizing what New York had become at that point. And again, this is just what I'm getting out of it. I have no ties to New York. I don't, you know, so if you live in New York, you might
completely disagree.
Like,
there was an interview that I saw with Bill Murray where he feels like this movie is for New Yorkers. So I don't think in any way it's like alienating anyone. I think it's just like an understanding of what you've been saying, and just kind of, I also don't think that it's, you know, not for anyone that's not lived in New York or not from there or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's it has a lot of New York in jokes, I think, that someone from there would appreciate.
Yeah. So I think there is this throughout the movie. There's this, it's like sort of a love letter / hate letter for New York and what it had became at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we'll get to our pick of the weeks here pretty soon, but I know we wanted to talk about, we've already talked about Bill Murray's role in this film.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about, this is a great cast for this film. Generally comedies revolve around kind of one comedic character, but you have someone like Jason Robards, who is a very serious actor of like the big screen and
been around for quite a while,
and really brings a lot to this movie, like a lot of I think prestige.
Yeah, and you need for the, you know, cop that's kind of hunting these bank robbers, you need an anchor, and you need someone that is like that, you know, that straightforward cop. But the great thing about him in this particular role, he plays a great cop, but you can also see like the humor around that, and you see how he's a great enough actor that you see his brain processing this whole thing.
Yeah.
So he works well in this comedy, without weighting it down like he's just like he were to feel out of place or something like that. He sits very well as the anchor for this movie, I feel like.
Yeah, Jason Robards to me has always been the perfect, we need this like gentle old man role with like a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah.
And it's he plays it so well. I mean, that's, so he always gets cast. But it is interesting to me, these movies that he did, like, I mean, he did this movie, which, is a very goofy film, even though he has a straight character. I mean, he chose to do this, and then prior to this, he did Dream a Little Dream, which I have a soft spot in my heart for that movie, even though I feel like it makes like almost zero sense. And Jason Robards like does what he can to like make that movie. He takes on like again like that movie and this movie. He brings that old man wisdom.
Yes.
That feels so real and honest, and it's like he does it so flawlessly, just so effortlessly. And I think you throw Jason Robards in here, you bring in Geena Davis and Randy Quaid, who I think both turn in excellent performances. Randy Quaid especially, I think he just
I know you love Randy Quaid, and so do I.
Yeah.
I'm more on the Geena Davis side, but Randy Quaid, like he holds strong onto his character in this movie.
I think Geena Davis grounds the film, but I think Randy Quaid,
he provides like that.
He's the looseness of the film, and Geena Davis is the rock.
He's also the character that gives us keeps that anxiety kind of working with, and again, not a anxiety driven movie, but he's the character that's like, we're all gonna die, we're not getting out of here. And Geena Davis is very much the grounding character to Bill Murray.
And I think when you have a movie that, and like how you said, like these sort of the anxiety movies where, not a survivalist film, but a film where you're trying to get out of some sort of jam, and it's built around several characters. You need that rock, you need the person who's like the realist, and then you need the person who's like totally in despair, like the panicky.
Yeah.
Every step of the way, they're just like whining and like
pathetic. And that's totally Randy Quaid in this.
And but he does it enough. It's like the fine line between being annoying and endearing.
Yeah, he doesn't cross the line where you're like, you know what? Can we just like axe this guy as soon as possible because I can't handle it.
And I do think that they use his character in a way of like, because Geena Davis is going to be a mother, and they do have a moment where she's sort of like consoling him, and he's like has his head rested on her stomach, and she's like consoling him and like showing that she's aware of everything that's going on. She's not necessarily afraid. She's ready to actually walk away from this situation, but she's still the comforter and the rock of this team.
And she cares.
Yeah, and she cares, even though she's would like to punch him in his face.
Yeah.
But no, I do. I think Geena Davis's greatness in this.
I was gonna say you told me this was before Thelma and Louise, right? That was.
Yeah, I think this is
92. I can't remember exactly.
I think 91 was Thelma and Louise, and so this was. I mean, Geena Davis has been quite a few things, but I think Thelma and Louise was her breakout. But this is like really ramping up to that. But I think that I think this is, even though like Bill Murray is like the marquee name. I think the three of them working together make this like exquisite team. And they all play off each other really, really well. And I think that's what keeps the anxiety and the tension and the drive going in this film, is like them playing off of each other.
Yeah. They're all very solid actors, and independently, like their characters couldn't differ any further. And what they all bring to it kind of makes like a cohesive unit that is there for drama and definitely creates comedy. I have to say there are more than a few, not necessarily one-liners, but scene setups that are just too good.
Example.
Well, I there's just like a moment where I have a lot of favorite scenes from this one, but there's a scene where it was right after the bank robbery. They roll up, they're lost, and they're like, well, this guy looks like a nice guy. Let's ask him for directions. And Bill Murray's like, I don't know. He's, I just don't like the look of him. And Geena Davis and Randy Quaid are like, he looks nice. He's fine. Look, he's got Iowa plates. He's from out of town. He's got a map. He can help us. You know, it's totally fine. And Bill Murray's cynical, classic, like, New Yorker being like, I don't like this. What it was, I don't know. Wasn't that serial killer family from Iowa? You know, just like being like completely not having it. Geena Davis, Randy Quaid, totally cool. It's going to be fine. Fast forward a little bit. This guy has a gun on him. He's looking to rob the next person, you know, that he comes across. It's a stolen car. And so while they're chilling in the car and Bill Murray's being escorted back to the car at gunpoint to presumably rob them. And at this point, we're like, as an audience, you know, we're like, oh, cool. There goes their $1 million they just robbed from the bank. They're completely relaxed in the car and talking about, like, I forget, like, what Geena Davis is talking. Oh, she's talking about Bill Murray and, you know, what she perceives is, like, him changing after this robbery, you know, kind of having a serious discussion. And then we see Bill Murray approach from the back, and she's like, oh, my God, this is an effing nightmare. Like, I can't deliver that line, but it is one of my favorite scenes where it's just, like, immediately the mood changes. And she's like, oh my God, this is an effing nightmare. And Bill Murray just leans in and goes, he doesn't even know the capital of Iowa. It's just like keeping the comedy going, but like in a completely tense situation.
Yeah. Yeah, he like keeps his composure through it all.
And you know what? I think Ron Howard's wrong because all three characters are someone to root for in this. I'm just going to go on record. One, Bill Murray's character.
You're going on record to say Ron Howard was wrong?
Yes, I'm saying
fine.
Ron Howard was wrong about this movie.
He's wrong in saying that because he said all these characters are unlikable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing to root for. One, Bill Murray's character as the mastermind bank robber totally could be set up as a self-centered jerk. But we see plenty of times how he illustrates how he actually does care about whether it's a scene with Randy Quaid's, you know, duct tape money to his ass. And he's like, okay, I got to go take care of him in the bathroom right now. Right. Please meet me on the plane, Geena Davis, you know, or like Geena Davis is, she's pregnant and she's in love with Bill Murray, wants to have a life with him, but is like so concerned about their future together. And Randy Quaid, even though he is, you know, the clown, the joker of it all, he has plenty of sentimental moments in this where he actually is, you know, caring towards Geena Davis or reassuring to Bill Murray when he feels insecure about something. Even though these people have committed a major federal crime, we do care about them.
Yeah, I agree. I think to me, you're totally rooting for them to make it, to get off scot-free. I don't think that there's, I don't think that it would be satisfying to see them get caught or apprehended.
No, not at all. And that's why it does feel, and how, I don't want to ruin anything, but I do really love the ending of this movie. And the ending of it, you're like, for every time I'm like, oh my God, how are they not going to get caught right now? But the ending,
maybe the person being
pretty great.
Maybe the most cynical person of this whole shebang was Ron Howard.
You know what? I think you're right about that.
Well,
too bad, Ron Howard.
Too bad you didn't get Direct Quick Change. That was a failure at the box office, but became a. That's the only poor bad thing about the story is like you know, the movie came out, Ron Howard's like, dodge that bullet.
Yep,
you know.
Yep, sure did.
Yep.
Whatever. It's a really good movie.
Though he did some like crummy movie like right around this time.
Probably.
Like Far and Away.
Far and Away.
Yeah. Anyway, if you haven't seen Quick Change, I highly recommend it. It's of all the movies that we've said are underrated or kind of off the radar,
this
of all
one
the movies we've covered, this is, again, I'm saying, I adore this film. I think it's. I wish more people would see it. I wish, when I brought it up, people were like, "Oh, I love that movie too." But yeah, I do think this is one of those films that really, as far as like a Bill Murray movie goes, like maybe isn't one that people identify with one of his major roles and characters, like a Caddyshack or a Groundhog's Day or Lost in Translation. But to me, I think this is where he really is the perfect balance of that cynical, sarcastic, lovable character. Like it all comes into play.
You know, those 3 movies you just mentioned, like he had, especially Caddyshack, like they're all very much like the story, like he's just riding the story on that. Even Groundhog Day, like the story is the movie.
Yeah.
And I love all of them, but this one was very much, it wouldn't necessarily work if it weren't someone like Bill Murray for this role in Quick Change. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he could be replaced in, Caddyshack, Groundhog Day, or Lost in Translation. Just saying that this one, it is incredibly important your casting in this.
It plays perfectly to his sensibilities.
Yeah.
So continuing on with our completely Murray-filled episode, our picks of the weeks were both Murray-centric films. You did Tootsie, which also had Geena Davis as well.
It was her first film role, actually.
Wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then I did Kingpin, which had the Murray and Randy Quaid combo.
I like that we both went for movies where Bill Murray was a supporting cast member. Too.
Yeah. It took me a while to think about what one I was going to do. But do you want to kick this one off? What can you tell me about Tootsie?
Well, I would say one of the greatest things about this very celebrated cross-dressing classic, as done by Sidney Pollack, who also co-stars in the movie. One thing that I find very cool about this one is the kind of soap opera style humor of the story, and that it also kind of confronts and exposes a lot of sexism. Something that wasn't the most common when the film was released in 1982, like I said. So Tootsie follows Dustin Hoffman, a hardworking actor who can't seem to land an acting gig to save his life. So naturally, while escorting his female friend to an audition, he decides to try out for the role himself, but in drag. And after he actually gets the part, his alter ego, Dorothy Michaels, is born, thus becoming a nationwide soap opera sensation. Tootsie has been on countless best of lists since it came out. It's also chocked full of a cavalcade of stars alongside Hoffman, like Jessica Lange, Terry Gard, Dabney Coleman, like I said, Sidney Pollack, Charles Durning, our boy Billy Murray, and like I already said, Geena Davis, it's more than just like a little snippet too. She's in a handful of scenes too. And in today's world, our hyper-conscious yet understandably sensitive culture, Tootsie actually does kind of scoot on by as a non-offensive film that's constantly confronting sexism, and also partly a little bit of sexual confusion, set in the early 80s, and like I said, somewhat unheard of, really. There were a handful of other movies made at the time that had to do with drag or anything kind of like hitting close to that base, but there weren't very many. Another aspect I love about this is that the well-known trans actress Holly Woodlawn, who is a good pal of Andy Warhol's, and Andy Warhol actually appears for a snippet in Tootsie. She was actually brought on set to help Dustin Hoffman adjust to a man performing as a woman. I think that's pretty forward-thinking and really cool for like 1982. What makes Tootsie so special to me is that it's not simply about a straight white man dressing in drag, because the woman that he becomes takes on a life of her own. Through living as a woman, Dustin Hoffman's character sees life through a woman's eyes. And this is not something like Mel Gibson in What Women Want. Okay, this is something a little bit deeper than that. One line that he says to Jessica Lange is, "I was a better man with you as a woman than I ever was with a woman as a man." Try to follow that one a little bit, but it makes sense. Even Dustin Hoffman, the actor, once said that after his first day of shooting, dressed as Dorothy, he went home, broke down in tears, and confessed to his partner that he needed to and was confronting his own preconceived sexist ideas about women that he hadn't really realized until this point. I think that's pretty cool. Not cool that he had a meltdown, but like pretty cool that going through this role like made him realize that. There's a lot of behind the scenes info in this film. Like I said, Geena Davis's film debut, that's pretty great. But also, of course, bringing it back to Billy Murray, he has a hefty uncredited supporting role in this movie as Dustin Hoffman's best friend. And a little quick change addition here, it wouldn't be until Quick Change that Geena Davis and Bill Murray would reunite. So good, 8 years later. It was Dustin Hoffman that lobbied for Bill Murray to play his best friend in the film, something that Sidney Pollack wasn't initially on board with. And Bill Murray was like super hot at the time. And in order to avoid this movie being stamped as a, quote, Bill Murray movie, he is uncredited at the beginning of the movie. Another reason this role is so awesome for Billy is because most of his lines are ad-libbed. As we said earlier in the podcast, go figure, Billy Murray ad-libbing his lines. But he, while he plays this part very straight-laced, there's a little hint of sarcasm, but he just plays a great best friend to Dustin Hoffman, and something that we just don't really see a lot in his career. This movie has a lot of over-the-top aspects, but I'd really advise you to seek it out if you haven't, especially because, there is a whole genre of movies about cross-dressing for whatever the reason may be, or someone, whether they body hop into another gender or something like that. I think Tootsie is a good endeavor into that. And if not for that, if you're a fan of Bill Murray, Dustin Hoffman, or Geena Davis, and at the time the rest of the cast was nothing really to sneeze at either. This is one that is one movie that's done with such care and intelligence, and I think crafty humor, that I haven't really seen anything else like it a lot. It's a movie that is, if you're an actor, you would really like this movie too. Focuses a lot on that aspect. There's a fair amount of good reasons that this movie still makes plenty of best of lists even today.
It's a movie. It's one that I think it was like harder for me to get into because I think the music was hard for me to get past.
I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
It was, the music is pretty rough.
You gotta get past that music.
It's almost parody.
I know.
It's weird.
The
80s were a strange time, though. It's like
I watched this one a few times through, and one of the times a friend of mine was with me, and she was actually like engaged in it, and then the music happened, and she didn't say anything, and I was like, just get past the music, okay?
And Lindsay, you know how huge a fan I am of like movies
that
love use a song with the title of the movie in it.
You love it.
I mean, I'm totally into it. I could not get on board with the Tootsie song.
Not the Tootsie song.
But no. I think it was a good pick, and I'm glad I watched it.
I'm really glad that you did too. I'm surprised that you did. I'm glad that you did.
Why
Thank
are you surprised I did?
I mean,
jeez.
What do you think? I want you to tell me about Kingpin. I love Kingpin. I just think about Bill Murray's comb over in this.
You weren't surprised I watched Kingpin?
I'm not surprised, but
I'm just messing
but
with you.
at the same time, I'm like, good. I'm glad he chose that one. That comb over is so much.
Kingpin. So Kingpin was my pick of the week.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to find, again, like with yourself, trying to find a Murray film where he wasn't the central character. It's not a movie that we've all seen. And two reasons why Kingpin came to mind was, one, we've got the Randy Quaid connection, where they're both in the same movie together. And secondly, Kingpin was a movie that was not a hit. It was kind of a miss, and later on kind of gained a following. Directed by the Farley brothers, who like sort of came out of the gate with Dumb and Dumber, which was just a huge hit. They did Kingpin and then had their biggest hit, which was There's Something About Mary. So in between these two massive hits was Kingpin, which was a little bit forgotten. And I think one of the reasons why this was not written by them, and I think their thing is like they go for this sort of mean-spirited, weird, gross out humor. And this was one of the few movies that they directed that they didn't write. And though I think that they put their little spin on things, I'm not a huge fan of the gross out humor stuff, and there is some of that in Kingpin, but I think not as much as their other movies. So maybe people weren't as into it, or who knows why movies don't hit. But this is a movie, like I said before, could have used a little more Bill Murray. The basic story is this guy, Roy Munson, portrayed by Woody Harrelson, who's kind of primed to be the greatest bowler. I really can't tell if this is a movie that's satirizing sporting movie tropes, or if it just is falling on them because it really does, like, point for point hits every sports cliche you can think of. And in the beginning you get the idea that it's sort of like poking fun, but then toward the end they've sort of blend lines. But he's sort of primed to be this great bowler, gets into entanglement with Bill Murray's character, who's like this sort of like eccentric, flamboyant, like crazy bowler who gets Woody Harrelson into trouble, and he ends up getting his hand cut off, kind of grossly destroyed, and he has this like rubber hand. And sort of the thing where now we cut to 20 years later, he's kind of washed up and kind of an alcoholic and living in poverty, and he happens to be at a bowling alley and hears Randy Quaid's character throw this strike, and he's like kind of turns his head, very Color Money style, like, whoa, what was that, and takes him under his wing. But Randy Quaid's character lives in this Amish community, and he's sort of been hiding the fact that he's bowls on the side. But of course you've got your basic setup of all these kind of comedy movies where it's just like they're gonna lose their farm if they don't have $500,000, and coincidentally there's this contest that it's $500,000. So he goes on this quest, and Randy Quaid goes on this quest to raise the money, being coached by Woody Harrelson's character. And I think the first 25 minutes of this movie are like comedy gold, and the last 20 minutes are great. Most of this is involving the Bill Murray character, which again, another movie where I looked into it and it's like, of course he like improvised all his lines. Like you said, the comb over is his idea. I think that overall it's a movie that, again, it's not the greatest, but I think it was one that like deserves a little attention, kind of was missed. There's some funny moments. I think Bill Murray plays, there's a bit where Bill Murray's, it's sort of like a commercial of him doing this like charity thing that is probably the best bit of the whole film. And he's just so outrageous in this, just him kind of doing what he does best. And kind of Woody Harrelson playing he really plays that like drunk, sort of mean-spirited character, like to a T. And Randy Quaid again turning in. I think this is really, like, I would say, like, of all the movies Randy Quaid has done, this is like probably like his biggest budgeted film, where he's like really the movie's on his shoulders to like kind of deliver a lot of the laughs, and he kind of plays it this sort of naive, straight goofball. Again, I feel like this kind of falls in line with Quick Change. It was a movie that got kind of like passed over, but it's worth taking a look and seeing what you think.
It was a great pick. I need to revisit that one. I haven't seen it. I saw that in the theater, and then probably like maybe once or twice afterwards. But it's been a long time since I've seen it. I did go through some highlight reels though of it.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to, if I remember correctly, I think it's a movie that I didn't appreciate when it came out. I think like I was a huge fan of Jim when, you know, the time Dumb and Dumber and Ace Ventura came out. And so There's Something About Mary. Like I was more into those movies, but now when I go back and watch Farley Brothers stuff, like Kingpin to me is like more of their shining star than their other films that they're known for.
Yeah.
So never could there be a more appropriate time to say, here's your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shucked?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
At the 2014 Academy Awards, Bill Murray gave a short but very fitting tribute to his comrade since the late 70s, Harold Ramis. Ramis had passed away earlier in the year, and if you remember this moment like I do, you saw Billy's faint, trademark smirky smile begin to fade into a straight-faced moment where tears began to well up in his eyes a little bit. Billy was presenting the award for Best Cinematography. For me, I started to weep as soon as he came out on stage, knowing about this 21-year-long rift that had been between the two, and that there was no way that Billy couldn't have been thinking about Ramis the moment he stepped out on stage. So these two became friends during their work with the Second City and National Lampoon's troops. After Ramis's success with Animal House and Meatballs, the latter starring Billy, Ramis moved on to the incredibly successful Caddyshack, also starring Chevy Chase and Billy. Then came Stripes, the first endeavor of the pair starring opposite each other. It was in this film where I feel like they came into their own, really, especially together. During their work together, Ramis said that if any scene wasn't working, they would step away for a little while, work it through the scene together in private, come back to the set, and comedic gold would just instantly be made. The Ghostbusters franchise was next, both starring Billy and Ramis. The success of these films goes without any explanation, really. We all know how big that franchise is. And then in 1991, work had begun on the sixth and what would be the final collaboration between the pair, Groundhog Day. During the course of filming, Billy's life wasn't in the best of shape. His marriage was spiraling down the tubes, resulting in him showing up late to the set, kind of throwing tantrums a little bit and getting in disagreements with Ramis about decisions about Groundhog Day fairly frequently. Instead of their usual collaboration during disagreements that would happen on previous films, Billy instead would stonewall Ramis. Perhaps the most well-documented reason was over the tone of the film. Ramis wanted a straightforward comedy. Billy thought it should be a deeper comedy, but still with a more philosophical feel to it. I know that there's a lot more going on here, but both Billy and Ramis kept the specific details of this close to their chest. After Groundhog Day wrapped, Billy refused to speak to Ramis. The creative differences, personal issues with each other, and unprofessionalism by Billy on the set seemed to drive a huge wedge into their partnership and friendship. Billy never really spoke about this. Ramis, however, would speak candidly about it throughout the years. He said that he had dreams where they were friends again, and it seemed to really plague him. I mean, how could it not? Some say that Billy was tired of hearing that Ramis was responsible for him having a successful career. Which I don't buy, and neither did Harold Ramis. He said he felt that Billy made a bad script, or he could have the ability to make a bad script into comedic gold just by improvising, just by his style of comedy, that he could really save anything. He said that he did think that he brought out some of the best comedic moments in Billy's career, but there's never been any air of superiority, like he felt like he was solely responsible for it. Now, after Ramis developed a disease that involved the swelling of his blood vessels called autoimmune inflammatory vasculitis, Brian Doyle Murray told his brother it was high time for him to talk to his long-lost friend. Billy knew Brian was right, decided it was a waste of time to continue not talking, and went to visit Ramis. The two of them finally reminisced and spoke for quite some time. Now, what they talked about, no one publicly knows. But with that amount of history, I can't imagine the conversation was about the Chicago weather. Ramis finally passed away not too long after that final time that they met. And when presenting that award for Best Cinematography at the Oscars, Billy said, and I quote, "Oh wait, we forgot one. Harold Ramis for Ghostbusters, Caddyshack, and Groundhog Day. It was in that moment when you just knew no matter what those two had gone through together, that he loved and appreciated Ramis like no one else. I know that I'll never forget that moment, and I'm not going to lie, it totally still brings tears to my eyes today. I can look up that YouTube clip, and it will totally bring tears to my eyes. Do you remember that, Justin?
Oh, yeah. As someone I've been having Oscar parties for, I don't know how long, since forever.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that particular moment was one where I was kind of sort of like looking away, like wiping my eyes.
He came out with Amy Adams, and she's like, you know, all Amy Adams, and he's like having a moment looking directly into the camera, like, and don't forget Harold Ramis. Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
I love you. Till next Murray moment.
This has been nice. I'm glad we were able to do this sort of like happy birthday, Bill.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we did Quick Change. It's such an underrated, great film of his. And it's always been something that's made me smile, that you and I like love this movie when I feel like no one knows this movie.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the Wes Anderson, Bill Murray.
Yeah, of course.
Collaboration, like to no end. But I'm glad that we have like this common ground on Quick Change.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Wes Anderson is what people know, which is great. And I'm so glad that happened. I just revisited Rushmore again recently, and I was like, duh, this movie's great. Like all of them. But yeah, like something like Quick Change, I feel like is always going to be shadowed, by newer movies, which is great for his career. That's awesome. Happy for him. But Quick Change still deserves its time, still holds up, and is a funny movie and quirky and weird and worth revisiting.
Yeah.
And Geena Davis and Randy Quaid. Come on.
You can't argue it.
No,
I mean, you could, but not here, not right now.
No, not right now.
Not with us.
No.
Well, that about wraps it up for
wrapping it up.
Our Murray special. So it's no secret here at the podcast that both of us are horror movie fans, and I'm pretty certain we've mentioned, maybe we haven't, that Halloween is our favorite holiday of all time.
Oh yeah.
And even though this isn't a horror movie podcast, we felt it necessary. We want to do something special for our first October doing the podcast.
Yeah.
So though this is bi-weekly, we're going to give you 4 episodes for the month of October.
Ooh.
All horror movies, but we're keeping them into what I constantly love, your category, genre of horror light.
Horror light.
Most of these are horror light, but so we're going to kick it off. We're going to kick October off with Pet Sematary.
So stoked about that.
We're going to follow it up with Serial Mom, because we've been wanting to do a John Waters movie here for a while.
I just start laughing immediately with Serial Mom.
We're going to follow that up with the original Wes Craven Nightmare on Elm Street.
A classic.
And then we're going to close out October on Halloween Eve with one of our all-time favorite movies.
Just going to say,
Fright Night, 1985's Fright Night. So
what is better than Fright Night?
This is just like going to be an amazing month. So if you're a fan, and even if you're not a fan of full-on horror movies, we hope you stick with us.
Yeah, these are going to be our regular straight podcasts. We're still doing our regular talking about the movie, picks of the week, Murray moment, everything. But you're getting it every week.
Yeah, and if horror movies aren't your bag, I understand. We're gonna get, we'll get back to the serious, to the non-horror stuff in November. But
don't worry, we got some serious stuff coming up for you.
But for October, we want to have a little fun, and a lot of this is for our own personal love of the holiday. But.
And we picked these specifically for the reason that a horror movie fan can like these movies, and also someone that's not immediately turned off by horror films can watch these.
Yeah, I hope these can be appreciated by.
And I tested this out on my partner with I showed her Serial Mom and Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is someone that has had nightmares and has had problems after watching horror movies. And both of these films, she was like, one, she loves Serial Mom. She thought it was hilarious. And Nightmare on Elm Street, she wasn't terrified by. And this is also someone that is watching this for the first time now.
Right.
So it's a whole different game. And I think some of these movies, looking back on them, they're maybe not as terrifying as they were when we first saw them. But I feel like you can still elicit the scariness from them.
Do you think she would go for Pet Sematary?
I think she could totally deal with Pet Sematary for sure. But and we go into this in Pet Sematary. I feel like that one is so sad to me that it's I kind of don't even want to show it to her, because I find it to be so devastating.
It's a bleak horror movie.
It is a bleak horror movie. But all of these, that's what I mean, is we picked these movies specifically because they're either fun, offbeat from your typical horror movie.
Yeah.
It's just something a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah, I think
from the horror.
I think
the horror vein.
We're the October we're gonna offer something, a little bit of something for everybody.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
That's the intention anyway. That's the goal. So look for us in October. We'll put up on our Instagram, Don't Push Pause Podcast, and our Facebook, Don't Push Pause Podcast. We'll put up our full October schedule so that you can follow along with us. You can always reach us at don'tpushpausepodcast.com. Or if you want to email us, you can always contact us directly at don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. So yeah, thanks so much for sticking with our fun-filled Murray episode.
Happy birthday, Bill!
Yeah, happy
68.
birthday, Bill! That's amazing. So until next time, I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reaper.
Thank you.